In the early days of America, in the late 17th century, a small village in Massachusetts became the epicenter of a horrifying chapter in history. The Salem witch trials, one of the most infamous episodes of mass hysteria and paranoia, continue to captivate our imagination and serve as a haunting reminder of the dangers of fear and ignorance. In this film, we will delve deep into the history, events, and consequences of the Salem witch trials, exploring the background of Salem Village, the outbreak of accusations, the witch trials, and the chilling executions that unfolded in 1692. Salem Village, situated on the Massachusetts Bay, was a Puritan settlement established in the late 17th century. The early settlers were deeply religious, strict in their adherence to Puritan beliefs, and sought to create a utopian society based on their interpretation of the Bible. It was within this environment that the seeds of the Salem witch trials were sown. The settlement was divided into two main parts, Salem Village and Salem Town. Salem Town was wealthier and more developed, while Salem Village was predominantly agricultural and less prosperous. This division fueled resentment and tension, contributing to the subsequent events. The village was also plagued by a series of challenges, including Indian attacks and disputes over property lines. This sense of vulnerability and fear added to the villagers' anxiety, setting the stage for the hysteria to come. In the winter of 1692, Salem Village found itself in the grips of a perplexing and unsettling phenomenon that would ultimately ignite the Salem witch trials. It was during this cold and unforgiving season that a group of young girls living in the village began exhibiting bizarre and unexplainable behavior, leading to a cascading chain of events that would forever alter the course of history. These girls, among them Abigail Williams, Betty Paris, and Ann Putnam, ranged in age from 9 to 20. Their affliction seemed to manifest as fits, violent convulsions, and a peculiar state of delirium. It was as though they were trapped in a nightmare from which they couldn't escape. Local physicians and ministers were summoned to examine them, but their efforts to diagnose and cure the girls proved futile. Instead, they only added to the growing sense of dread that something otherworldly was occurring. One of the early attempts to make sense of this inexplicable phenomenon involved the diagnosis of the girls' affliction as the result of bewitchment. Dr. Linda Caporale, a modern historian and researcher, has suggested that their symptoms might have been attributed to ergot poisoning, a fungus that can develop on rye and wheat crops. Consuming contaminated grains can lead to hallucinations and various physical symptoms that might have resembled the girls' peculiar behavior. However, we must remember that in the context of the times, such occurrences were typically attributed to supernatural causes. The villagers, steeped in Puritan beliefs and the fear of the unknown, were more inclined to see the devil's hand at play than consider natural explanations. These early episodes of unexplained illness and distress soon snowballed into something much more sinister. The afflicted girls began accusing specific individuals within the community of bewitching them. Their initial targets were Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, a Barbadian slave owned by Reverend Samuel Paris, the father of Betty Paris and uncle of Abigail Williams. It's essential to note that Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne were not held in high regard in the community. Sarah Good was a beggar who struggled to make ends meet, while Sarah Osborne had faced accusations of moral impropriety. Both women were vulnerable to accusations and easy targets. Tituba, as a slave and a foreigner, was an even more convenient scapegoat. The accusations of witchcraft quickly spread, and soon the village was plunged into a full-blown witch hunt. Magistrates and religious authorities took the girls' claims seriously, believing that Satan was at work in Salem. This trial set a dangerous precedent, as it legitimized the accusations and established the idea that witches were among the community. As the hysteria escalated, more than 150 people were arrested and accused of witchcraft. Accusations were based on flimsy evidence, such as spectral evidence, claims that witches' spirits appeared to the afflicted, and the presence of witches' marks, moles, birthmarks, or scars believed to be signs of witchcraft. These arbitrary accusations led to the imprisonment and suffering of innocent individuals. The examinations and trials of the accused were often conducted in a deeply biased manner, with the accused having limited legal representation and facing a hostile court. Many were forced to confess under extreme duress or threats of execution. Those who refused to confess faced an almost certain death sentence. Spectral evidence, the claims that the afflicted could see the spirits of witches tormenting them, became a linchpin of the trials. This form of evidence was inherently problematic since it relied on the testimony of the accusers who claimed to see these spectral manifestations. The visions were invisible to anyone but the afflicted, rendering them a highly subjective and unreliable basis for accusations. The courtroom's reliance on spectral evidence gave the afflicted girls tremendous power. Their claims had the potential to condemn individuals to a fate of execution, and they were rarely questioned or challenged in their assertions. The accused, who were already under enormous stress, faced an uphill battle when confronted with these accusations. In addition to spectral evidence, another disturbing aspect of the trials was the use of witches' marks as incriminating evidence. Witches' marks were perceived as physical signs of a person's involvement in witchcraft. They could take the form of moles, birthmarks, or scars and were often cited as proof of guilt. The first to face the gallows was Bridget Bishop on that fateful day of June 10, 1692. Her execution marked the beginning of a grim procession of hangings that would leave Salem village in a state of shock and despair. Bridget Bishop's fate was sealed, and she met her end on Gallows Hill, an elevated and ominous site near the village. Gallows Hill, now synonymous with terror and despair, served as the stage for these chilling executions. It was a place of profound sorrow and fear, where innocent lives were taken, and the very heart of the community seemed to wither under the weight of its collective guilt. Over the following months, the list of those condemned to die grew longer, and the gallows continued to claim the lives of the accused. This included individuals like Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and George Burroughs, among others. The community was forced to bear witness to a relentless parade of public hangings, each one casting a darker shadow over the village. The executions were public events, and the accused's friends and family members were compelled to attend, adding an extra layer of horror to the proceedings. As the accused were led to the gallows, the faces of their loved ones bore the agony of watching their dear ones meet their gruesome fate. The trials had taken a particularly sinister turn when respected members of the community were accused and executed. Rebecca Nurse, a deeply religious and highly regarded woman, was one such victim. Her execution, despite her unblemished reputation, sent shockwaves through the community and gave rise to profound doubts about the validity of the trials. Gallows Hill was a place of torment, a stark reminder of the community's complicity in the hysteria that had gripped them. As the executions continued, it became increasingly evident that the trials had cast a long shadow, and the community's unity had been irrevocably fractured. The hangings were meant to serve as a stark warning to those who might dare to challenge the prevailing hysteria. As the innocent lives continued to be lost, a sense of dread and remorse began to envelop Salem village. The realization that the trials had gone too far and that innocent lives had been destroyed began to crystallize. In October 1692, Governor William Phips, in response to the mounting public outcry, dissolved the Court of Oyer and Termine, the tribunal responsible for the witch trials. As the new year of 1693 dawned, many of the accused were released from prison, some of them having spent months in confinement. While efforts were made in the years that followed to acknowledge the miscarriage of justice and provide some compensation to the families of the victims, the scars of the Salem witch trials ran deep. In 1711, the Massachusetts General Court formally exonerated those who had been convicted during the trials, a gesture that served as a belated recognition of the wrongs that had been done. As the summer of 1692 came to a close, the Salem witch trials began to lose their momentum. In October 1692, Governor William Phips dissolved the Court of Oyer and Termine, which had been responsible for the trials. He also prohibited the use of spectral evidence, effectively putting an end to the witch trials. By early 1693, many of the accused were released from prison, and the remaining prisoners were eventually pardoned. The Salem witch trials had left a deep scar on the community, one that would take years to heal. Families were torn apart, reputations were destroyed, and trust was shattered. The trials left a legacy of shame and regret that the community could not easily escape. Don't miss out on our exciting content, hit that subscribe button and join our YouTube community today.